Welcome everybody who's on the Zoom call. We're lucky because today we have someone coming to us from a ranch in Oregon. Les Zaitz is going to be doing a talk this hour on regaining readers' trust, and then if you're all wise, you'll stay on for his next session, which is small staff, big impact, engaging your community through investigative journalism. And nobody knows more about investigative journalism, I would claim, than Les does. Les Zaitz is an Oregon native. He is a two-time Pulitzer finalist. While he was a student at the University of Oregon, he was a staff reporter at the Salem Statesman Journal and a correspondent for the Springfield News, the Oregon Journal, UPI, for those of you who remember that, and the New York Times. From 1976 to 87, he was a reporter for the Oregonian, handling various beats before taking on an assignment in 1982 on the newspaper's investigative team. And he's been on and off investigative teams ever since. In 1987, though, while all of this was going on, Les and his became the owner and publisher of a weekly called the Kaiser Times newspaper in Oregon. His family still owns that newspaper, which consistently wins journalism awards. After returning to the Oregonian in 2000, he served as senior investigative reporter and editor. In 2007, he was part of a team that won the prestigious National George Polk Award and was a finalist for the Pulitzer. He's also a finalist for the Pulitzer in 2014. He's a 5-time solo winner of Oregon's Bruce Baer Award, the state's top award for investigative reporting. The Oregon Newspaper Publishers Association in 2016 awarded him its highest honor for career achievement, and that was an award they had not given since 2010. Les sort of retired from the newspaper industry in 2016 and returned to community journalism as the editor and publisher of the weekly Malheur Enterprise, which is in Vail, Oregon, about a county over from where he lives on his ranch. His family's purchase of the Enterprise rescued that newspaper from closure. With a very small team, he does great investigative reporting, which is a real focus of the newspaper's work. And the Enterprise has won state, regional, and national journalism awards. Les likes to keep busy, and he seems to be very entrepreneurial. And in 2018, he founded with a partner, the Salem Reporter, which is a digital news service based in Oregon's capital. The service has formed a collaboration with 2 other Oregon news organizations to create the Oregon Capitol Bureau, which focuses on state government reporting. Les leads the team of 4 reporters as its editor, so he's obviously busy. Les lives on a remote ranch in Grant County, Oregon, and he and his wife run a horse house. Good, Betsy. A horse cow operation. So I don't know what Les isn't doing, but he's doing a whole lot of things really, really well. And we're excited to have him here today. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Les.
Great. Thanks very much, Betsy. I'm just going to dive right in because I'm really excited about this topic and visiting with all of you in Virginia about something that I remain very passionate about, and that's the future of journalism. And as we sit here today, as we gather around our computer terminals, there is no more important task for every one of you than to help regain the trust of the American people in the press. Everything that we do in our businesses and as journalists depends on regaining that trust. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Because if we don't make material advances and progress to convince more people that what we do is worth paying for, then what we're doing every day really is just typing practice. And we have a lot of challenges, but I want to leave you, I hope, at the end of this hour with a feeling of good news that much of what we need to do to tame this circumstance is in our control. It is not something that depends on the national media or national environment. It is within the control of every newsroom and every news organization in Virginia and across the country, as here in Oregon. And I get kind of cranked up about this topic because it is so important to our country and so important to our society, not to mention the importance to our businesses, that we do really focus on this idea of how do we get the American people to once again turn to us as a source of information. And look, I remain convinced, despite all the polling, despite what we've seen across the United States the past couple of years, that the American people really hunger for trusted news sources, and particularly local news sources. And this is no surprise to most of you, but I think we react sometimes too intuitively and not proactively enough to harness that desire for that trust. I mean, our readers, our communities are looking for organizations that present news in a fair way, news that they can trust, and news that is a fair reflection of their community. And if we can do that, we can continue to sustain and build our organizations, not only as journalistic enterprises, but as successful business enterprises. And I'll say up front, I am not a business wizard. I am a journalist through and through, down to my bone marrow. But I've come to realize that if I don't have a successful business, I can't do anything about journalism. They obviously go hand in hand. And hopefully what we talk about today in the next session will hopefully inspire and help you achieve some continuing success. We all know the challenges that we face right now in this business. I don't know about you, but my inbox is just a regular flow of reports and studies and analyses of the news business, of journalism. We have to learn about community engagement. We have to learn about audience engagement. We have to learn about digitizing. We have to learn about solutions journalism. What metrics do we use? What metrics do we follow? What metrics don't we follow? And then on top of that, we've had the generational changes in this business that have impacted us. Of course, we had the shift to television many years ago, and then the shift to cable news, and now the shift to social media. And all of that fragments our audiences and gorges on the advertising revenue that used to be our primary source of fuel to do what we want to do. But we also have done some of this to ourselves in losing some of our audiences and to our American readers. I think that we have in some ways been arrogant over the years, and maybe not directly, maybe not deliberately, but I think just in practice that we have essentially told the American people, you need us, you need what we have, and we are important, and you should pay attention to us. Well, that doesn't go over as well as we thought it might. We've assumed that people understand what it is that we do as journalists, and they don't. And that's a failing of all of us, that we have not been more deliberate, more direct in explaining what it is it takes to produce journalism that can be trusted, why we can be trusted, what we do to get facts straight, what we do when we make a mistake. I cannot tell you how many reporters and editors I have talked to over the years when I ask that question, when's the last time you explicitly told a reader, we work hard to get the facts right? I get sort of a shoulder shrug because, again, for our profession, we just assume that our communities, our readers know what it takes to make the secret sauce that we call journalism. And I think that's a source of a lot of the trouble that we have right now. But it's also something that we can control and that we can change. The other thing that we've seen, of course, in accelerating rate in recent years is the dilution of news. You have news organizations closing, you have news organizations merging, you have the cable and news networks have turned into typically shout fests that tend to sort of override what we're trying to do locally, and people assume that what they see on TV is what's going on in your newsroom. And so, we have those issues. We've also seen, and this has troubled me consistently in recent years, where we try to convince our communities that less is more. Each time I see a daily newspaper drop a daily edition and say, well, you're just going to get more news. Look, our readers are not dumb. They understand that less is not more. And when we try to sort of put icing on the meatloaf, so to speak, we erode our credibility with a community. We don't win a lot of friends, I think, by trying to be less direct about what it is that's happening to us. I think we're far better off. You are far better off. Your communities will trust you more if you just say, look, business is down, our resources down, and to keep performing and serving the community, we have to cut back. And here's what that means for you. I think trying to disguise reductions as somehow an improvement in the product is part of that arrogance that I think leads to the distrust of our readers across the country. And on our content, we tend to stay with the fairly traditional formulas of journalism. I mean, there have been innovations, and I'm speaking globally and generically, of course. But what we see in content, and I judge a lot of contests, is that we have newsrooms that just continue to do sort of cookbook journalism, and that doesn't work in this day and age. There are too many competing resources for those eyeballs out there, and doing things the way we've always done it, because that's sort of the standard, just will not work. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And we also kind of excuse ourselves from the kind of performance that our readers really need and expect. We say that we don't have enough staff, we don't have enough community support. We worry more about what we don't have than what we do have. And frankly, for this afternoon's conversation, I want to turn that focus around. In your newsrooms, you do have reporters. Maybe you don't have as many as you once did. You do have editors, I hope, and perhaps they're working regionally. You have that resource. You have the delivery mechanism. And many of you have a brand that you have spent decades and even centuries building. I mean, you have precious, valuable assets at your disposal to serve your communities. It is how you use that resource, every dollar, every hour of labor to serve that community. And my message to you is to be sure that everything that you are doing is aligned with that goal right now of regaining the trust of the American reader. Because with that trust will come the credibility, will come people willing to pay, will come the business survival and sustainability and perhaps expansion, as we've had in Vail, Oregon, from that formula. You all have different skill sets. Frankly, most of you are far better business operators than I am. I can write a headline in a heartbeat, and I know what a P&L looks like, but I have a hard time selling an ad. But we all bring different skills and different interests to this work. And let me share with you, if I can, a little bit about the backstory of the Macker Enterprise, because it illustrates, I think, what's possible. When my family started looking at the Macker Enterprise, it's a weekly newspaper, it's 100 years old. It is based in the poorest county in Oregon. It is in a county that is literally in a different time zone than the rest of the state. When we looked at it, it had one reporter who had no journalism training. He was a former prison guard. The rest of the staff was part-time. The paper was littered with press releases, printed verbatim, quote unquote guest columns from state agency officials, and ubiquitous submitted photos. And most of the time, that's what's dominated to page one. The one reporter on deck at the time was really fascinated with high school sports, and so the paper had just reams and reams of nearly unreadable copy about high school sports. The community is impoverished. The county is impoverished. It has about a 30% poverty rate. And the owner lived in another state. He had to scramble every single payroll to pump money into it just to cover the payroll checks. And so you may wonder, well, why in the world would you even look at such a thing? And I've asked myself that question several times. But I'll tell you this, that in this day and age, every time a news resource winks out, whether it's a weekly newspaper or a daily or even an AM broadcast station, a community loses a voice. And when it loses that voice, it loses, once again, access to local information that helps bind the community, that helps sustain the community, that helps build the community. And so while I was really eager to retire after many, many years in this business, and I've been at this for like 45 years now, I just couldn't abide the idea that a county seat weekly newspaper would go out of business because there was no reason for it to. I looked at it, and about a half a day, I could see what the issues were. And it wasn't because this was a paper that was just being crushed into oblivion by economic forces. It was being crushed into oblivion by horrible mismanagement. And I saw an opportunity here to essentially take this newspaper and use it as a journalism laboratory to test some really deep-held theories I've had about what's going on in journalism in this country. And that really kind of focused on, with the erosion in newspaper circulation in particular, I kind of wondered, well, what if we provided a publication that was of a high journalistic caliber, that was well connected to the community, that focused on that trust, that listened to the audience? Could we rescue this thing? Now, I'll tell you, when the prior owner had it for sale, he had very few lookers even. And he got to the point where he was willing to take a pickup truck in trade for this entire news operation. Well, I needed my pickup truck at the ranch for taking care of the horses and cows. And so I made a pretty modest offer, and he got it before I could hardly get it out of my mouth. And all of a sudden I had caught the bus going down the road. And now what do I do with it? Well, my focus was, number one, the content. Of course, we stripped out the press releases as soon as we could. And we set a mantra of a singular focus on providing reliable, well-prepared news product. And I can't emphasize how much that has been important to us. I mean, I still edit virtually every story that goes into the enterprise because again, based on the judging I've done in newspaper contests, and I read lots and lots of newspapers from around the country, there are still too many newsrooms that are delivering stories to readers that are incomprehensible. And by that, I mean, the focus is unclear, the language is bureaucratic, it reads more like meeting minutes of the Gainesville City Council than it does of the work of a journalist trying to explain to a reader what happened to their sewer rates. So the content is foundational to what we did at the enterprise. And I took this former prison guard who was on staff and eager to learn, and trained him up on just the basics of a straight news story. And by sharpening up the news content, we compete against a family-owned chain daily in our county that frankly had a very similar formula at the time. And God bless them, they still do run largely local news coverage that I think the average reader is mystified what they're trying to tell the reader. But what we did is not only did we focus on the clarity of a story. I mean, I think just clear, direct language is something that is in the control of every single newsroom. This is not something you need consultants for. This is not something that needs to be brought down from some national level. I mean, every single newsroom has the ability to write a clear, direct sentence. Now, I know that sounds kind of absurd to say, but I'm sorry that again, too many news outfits allow reporters and editors to get away with sort of standard formulaic writing, and then we wonder why our readers aren't sticking with this. So it was not only the content, but we also made a determined effort. Of course, with my enterprise and investigative background, this was probably an easier pivot than in many newsrooms. But I decided that this was a community, a county with 2 newspapers that I don't think had asked a hard question of a public official in decades. And so we started in, modestly, we were not doing 5-part series and not doing major projects. And I'll talk more about that this afternoon if you're interested on what we did specifically on investigative work. But what we did is started questioning public officials, and we found very quickly that readers appreciated that somebody was there watching out for them. And we were really transparent with our readers. And I think this is another really important point that goes back to the arrogance of our profession and the assumptions that we have made for too many years. I started being pretty persistent and regular in writing columns in our publication to explain how does journalism work? What do we do? How do we get our information? What are our principles? And we post our principles on our website, and you're more than welcome to take a look at them. But we remind readers regularly that we do have principles that we live by, why we live by them, and we ask them to hold us accountable to be true to those principles. That transparency, when people understand that you're not looking to do clickbait, and I had this conversation just the other day with some Chamber of Commerce board members who asked about, well, now do you just do stories so do you get lots of clicks? Well, no, we don't. I mean, we don't live off of clicks. We live off of sustained readership by our community. We explain to people what we do to try and make sure that our stories are fair and accurate. We are explicit with our readers that we don't have a political leaning, we don't have a favoritism towards any organization, and that our duty is to them alone and nobody else. And I tell them that time after time, year after year, and you know what? I think they start now to believe that. But think about that. Ask yourselves in your own operations, when's the last time anyone talked to the reader to explain what it is that you're doing to try and serve their needs? That's really important. You know, and I just never, ever lose sight of who we're trying to serve. And I keep that reader in my mind all the time. And I remind not only my news staff, but my sales staff and my business staff that everything we do day in and day out has got to be perceived by our customers, by our readers, by our business advertisers as in their interest and not in our interest. And that's an important distinction. And I will tell you, we have a little a bulletin board in our shop in Vail where we post the cards that we get from readers, you know, thanking us or you know, simply, you know, encouraging us to keep going on tough stories. I want to just share one email that came in just this Monday. It says, I'm very impressed with your investigative pieces in the paper lately. I can't make fun of the Malheur enterprise for copy pasting AP stories in syndicated opinion columns. Thank you so much. Keep up the good work. You really are making a difference. Well, I shared that with the entire staff. And what kind of a day do you think they had? How motivating do you think that kind of an email is when they're dealing with some really tough, controversial stories in our community right now? Those sorts of emails, those sorts of messages are compensation that I'll take over a paycheck just about any day, because it tells me we're connecting with our community. We're doing what people expect of us. So what happened at the enterprise as we made this transition? Well, I'll boil it down. You know, we were a weekly mail subscription newspaper with less than 1,000 circulation. Circulation has gone up year by year in print. We saw business advertising. People want to be where people are reading, and they want to be connected with an organization that has credibility in the community. There's a value to businesses to being associated with your integrity, with your credibility, that sort of reflects on them when they place advertising with us. We were very deliberate about setting up a website, because when we took it over, there was no website, had no Facebook page, no social media presence. And I made a decision that even in a remote rural community, an older community, an agricultural community, that in this day and age, that we had to have a website that could function as our daily newspaper. And we continued to work on this. We're by no means perfect on this, but more and more, when we get a story, we drive it out to our website, and it automatically goes to our Twitter and Facebook feeds. Well, let me share something about that Facebook page. We started out, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years ago now, with a Facebook page that had 0 followers, and the daily newspaper had one for many, many years. But I cannot tell you how excited I was last year when the Little Mail Here enterprise caught and passed the more established daily and Facebook likes and followers. And now we have become a sort of a community platform for daily news. And that means a lot to me and to us, because that Facebook page is just a constant marketing presence, and not that we're using it for advertising ourselves, but we just put our content out there, and it's behind the paywall for the most part. But people are reminded on a daily basis what we're doing to serve the community. And I can tell you that during major emergencies in our community, and I specifically remember 3 or 4 years ago when we had record-breaking snows that literally were crushing buildings, that we turned our website and our Facebook page into sort of a 24/7 news source. This freeway's closed, that road's closed. They need help at the cultural center. They got 2.5 feet of snow on. They need people to get up there and help shovel the snow off. And boy, that branded us as the place to go to in an emergency for accurate information, for tips, for guidance, for references. And the other thing that we did is that we added in a digital subscription. Now, I think this is one of the areas where many of us have made a mistake over the years in print, that we did print, we put up a website, and we just gave the news away for free on the website because we didn't much care about it. It was a print product. And I started out at the beginning creating 2 different products. You can subscribe to the print product, or you can subscribe to the digital product. One does not get you the other. And when I instituted that, I was braced, because of the experiences I've heard around the country. I was braced for blowback, particularly from our print subscribers, saying, why the hell do I have to pay for your digital online news if I'm a subscriber? Well, here's the answer. You remember I talked about transparency, about being candid with your community about your financial circumstance? I developed a routine response where I explained, look, the print product gets you what is promised, the weekly newspaper delivered by mail to your home. The digital subscription service gets you what's promised there, 24/7 access to all of our stories that are online. I will tell you that in the years since we started doing digital subscription, the number of complaints I've gotten from or queries from print subscribers has dwindled to 1 or 2 a month. And further, I'll tell you that when I explain to them that we need to do this because we're trying to sustain our news operation, that we need these revenue resources, I invariably get a note back from people that say, okay, thank you, I understand. And you know what else happens? I would say probably 1 out of 4 times when people are questioning about why they can't get the digital service, they keep their print subscription and they add the digital. And so I've got double dippers out there. And what do you think that does for your revenue prospects? It does quite a bit. And remember, I'm in a rural community with a high poverty rate. And let me tell you one other secret about those digital subscriptions. Now, most news organizations that I see, including the New York Times, and I've got good friends of the New York Times, offer these incredible circulation deals. Get digital access for $1 for the rest of your life, or 6 months or whatever. My print subscription for in county right now is $46 a year. Okay. I have to print it, I have to label it, I have to pay postage, I have to get it delivered. A digital subscription to the Malheur Enterprise will cost you $60 a year. And you can imagine, what's the incremental cost every time I get a new digital subscriber? What's the incremental cost versus an incremental cost of a print? I will tell you, last year, our digital subscriptions well surpassed the print to where it is now a major source of revenue, and it almost entirely funds my news department. That's rather remarkable, I think, in a rural community. But it's remarkable only in this sense, that it proves what I theorized when I bought the enterprise, that if you give people the right quality of journalism, explain what you're doing, that they will support that, they will find the value, and they will pay for it. And we continue to grow in our digital subscription, even though the population in Malheur County remains fairly static. I think the lesson for me, and I hope it's something that all of you that don't have robust websites will take to heart, is that our future business success really does depend on digital. It is not at all possible in this day and age for print organizations to continue to treat websites as sort of an ancillary business, a bother. It's just something we have to have. Rather, it ought to be the primary focus, particularly of the news department. And print, I frankly, and I grew up in a print. I mean, I know how to set type by hand out of a type case. But I finally made the mental shift in my head that, look, the print product is sort of the historical record for the community. The real news is on the website, and that's how we treat it. And that's what we try to do, is to drive stories out to the website, and then the print folks will get them. Now, I will also share that I worried at some point that if we kept putting the news up on the website, and I put up a story online on Thursday and our print subscriber doesn't get it till next Wednesday, are they going to be unhappy about that? Am I going to get complaints about that? And I will tell you, I can't remember the last time anyone said anything about, gee, the news in your paper is stale. As you know, I mean, there is a certain segment of our population that just still enjoys holding that print product. And as long as it's local news and it's credible, then they're not too worried about the timing, apparently, because I'm just not getting any complaints. I guess I want to wrap up so I can leave time for questions here, and I don't want to go on endlessly because I could. I want to go back to the beginning of where I started this conversation this afternoon, and that's about regaining the trust. I really believe that the success we've had with the Malheur Enterprise it can be traced to that focus on content and that insatiable desire to demonstrate to our community day in, day out, hour by hour, issue by issue, story by story, that we are determined to give them news that they can trust, news that they find as fair, and frankly, that news that's worth paying for. We make no apologies to our community that if you want this kind of journalism that you can't get anyplace else that is serving your interest, you have to help sustain it. You have to help establish this. And one of the things I want to share about this is that this has had economic impacts as well, this trust issue. And let me share a story about that. We'll talk about it in more detail, but a couple of years ago, we started doing some really tough reporting on the county's economic development program. A lot of questions about where money was going, what it was really accomplishing. And Oregon has a pretty robust public records law. And the director quit giving us interviews and wouldn't respond to written questions. So we had to resort to requesting public records. When we started taking that approach, he started charging, as the law allows, some pretty stiff fees. Well, you know, we were still not all that financially stable, and I thought, well, how in the world are we going to cover these costs, which could run to hundreds and thousands of dollars? And so I turned to the community, and again, this goes to the transparency. I said, we're trying to do this reporting to get at the truth of what's going on with your tax money, but they're trying to tax us out of doing our job. We need your help. And so I launched what I call Dollars for Disclosure. We need you, the community, to help send in donations to the Malheur enterprise so we can afford these fees and they can't use that to keep us away from the public records. Now, we're a for-profit business. We don't have a charitable arm. We're not a foundation. Nobody's going to get a tax advantage from giving a donation to the Malheur enterprise. But I will tell you, in 60 days, we had more than $5,000 come in the door, by mail, by check. And I'll never forget when the office manager came back to my desk one day and laid $500 bills on my desk. I said, "What's this?" He said, "Well, a gentleman just came in. He really likes what we're doing on the economic development project, and he wanted to help. And he just put these on the counter and said, go get them." And I asked him his name, and he didn't want to say who it was. So to this day, we don't know who that was. But imagine that, someone motivated enough by what we're doing on behalf of the community to walk in and lay down $100 bills to buy public records to do our reporting. That's an extraordinary development. I'll never forget that, what that told me about our impact in the community. Our job, your job, is to prove to the readers every single day that you are out to serve their interests, to be explicit about it, to be clear without being bellicose or bragging about it, just being matter of fact about it. I think that it's very clear that you are going to establish that you value their trust, you're going to earn their credibility, and that you see value in what you do and you hope that they will pay for it. And I think that's really, at the end of the day, in my mind, my little small place out here in Eastern Oregon, the key to the future of this profession. Because and we're proving it in Malheur County that people will pay, and pay a pretty good rate for an impoverished community for news that is credible. So with that, I'd like to stop. I'd like to really open it up for comments or questions. It's just, I'm excited about this topic because I think all of us, we do have some control. I mean, again, the bad news is easy to come by in our business and in our professions. It is, what can we do to turn this around? What do we have under our control? And that ability to build that credibility and trust is what we control.
Les, this is fabulous. You're really saying things that I think we all need to hear and want to hear. A question came in. If you're in a small community, your investigative work often involves people you went to school with, people your spouse works with, people you go to church with, etc. How do you balance investigating the community with being a member of the same community?
That's a great question, and that's another hour-long conversation. Look, yeah, and Vail is a small town. I mean, the courthouse is 2 blocks from our office. You know, you bump into the county judge at Mal's Diner when you go over to get your burger and milkshake. You know, so I've been in Kaiser. I was on the chamber board and on this board and that. So I understand that psychological impact of encountering people that you are writing about or for. I think, again, this is the transparency issue and making clear with your community who you serve. And when you do that, then even that people that may not like your story, or maybe are even the target of your story, they may not like it, But if they can't point to an error or point to bias, then what I have found in my career is that folks will get angry, but as human beings, most of us can't hold on to anger very long. And if you're making clear that this is my job, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm sorry you don't like it. If you have an issue with any fact, let us know. We'll fix it. Otherwise, uh, it's our duty to report this to the community, and we can't hide it, and we're not going to hide it. You know, and I have reported on friends over the years, and it is all. I can tell you, every one of my friends knows that. Yeah, well, we're great friends, but if I ever catch you doing something illegal, you're going on the front page. They just understand that's part of the paradigm of being a journalist and doing well in the United States. Again, I cannot emphasize enough the value of that transparency of talking to the community, because when you are explaining to readers what you do to get your stories right, those people that your wife works with or that you go golfing with are reading that as well. And if you're interested, I think in about an hour, the Enterprise will post a piece I wrote on Monday, how we did this story. We had a major investigative piece come out, and now I'm going in and I'm sharing with readers. Here are the documents we went for. Here are the questions, every single question we sent the public officials that they didn't answer. So readers can see what we did to try and establish that. And you know, that sort of transparency just goes so far towards building the trust of the people you most ought to be concerned about. And those are the people who are your paying readers.
Okay, switching topics a little bit. What advice do you have for a free newspaper that offers mail subscriptions only to cover the cost of the weekly mailing? Any suggestions for a way to handle the website?
So I'm not quite clear on
I
the
may not have
question.
read
So the
this
newspaper.
correctly. What advice do you have for a free newspaper that offers mail subscriptions only to cover the cost of the weekly mailing? Any suggestions for a way to handle the website? I assume they mean pricing the website, charging for the website.
Yeah, look, I think in Malheur County, the way we do it is it's $5 a month. Well, people don't do a lot of math. You know, they can afford $5 a month. Well, that's $60 a year. I think that if you are providing any product just to cover the cost, and it doesn't really give you the freeboard to do more than that, then you're undervaluing yourself. I think all of us have to have faith and confidence that what we do is worth paying for. I get really irritated when I see news organizations kind of begging for support. You can't beg for support; you have to earn the support.
Right.
And I think even a free publication, you know, on the website, don't be embarrassed about charging for access. Explain why you're charging for the access, and then put your hand out and ask for the money.
Well, I think what this person was asking is, we have, for instance, a member that's a weekly and it's free, and they distribute to about 70,000 people a week. So how do, you know, they're getting everybody, all those 70,000 people are getting that paper dropped in their driveway or wherever, however it's coming. How do you get them to pay for the website? How do you convert from basically being a free newspaper to being either a print for pay or digital for you have to pay for? I mean, that's the problem. You're already giving it to them free. You're totally based on advertising.
Yeah, well, I'll be real honest. I with free publications, that's a whole nother genre that I frankly don't understand. But look, even if someone threw me into an operation where the print product was free, again, I would bifurcate and say, okay, if you want access to the digital stuff, you're going to pay for it,
Right.
right?
Right.
I mean, you're already giving the stuff away, but you already have the product. You have whatever you're putting in your free paper, you have the content to put online. Put it behind a paywall, and I'll bet that publication will be surprised. I mean, look, if only 500 people paid $5 a month, and you net almost all of that. I mean, that's enough to cover more than your mailing costs. But
Yeah.
I'm betting if you are delivering 70,000 places, that if you put that content online, you could develop an online paid service pretty rapidly.
Right. Okay. Here's a good one. Some of the advice seems to center around developing better writing and doing additional writing to explain what we're doing. How are you thinking about allocating your limited hours and staffing to that end?
Well, I'm going to touch on that in the investigative reporting seminar. So I would
Stay
say,
tuned, right?
stay tuned. Come find out.
Okay. All right. Here's one that I think is interesting. You talk a lot about being in a rural community, an impoverished one. Are there differences in the ways to earn the trust of readers in a rural versus an urban or maybe even a suburban community? If so, how?
Well, look, I started a all digital news service in Oregon's capital city of Salem, which is a market of about 400,000 people, right? So I do have experience both in a rural area and the urban area. I will tell you, my experience in Salem is no different than it is in rural Oregon. That we hear constantly from people in Salem about how much they regard our factual, straight ahead, non-biased approach to writing. And how do I know that? Well, I don't do a lot of surveys, but about a month ago, we don't have any commentary on our Salem site, the Salem Reporter. I don't do editorials. I do an occasional column about a story, but I don't have letters to the editor. And every once in a while, I get a request from someone to run. Would you accept a guest opinion? Oh, we don't have a page for that right now. So I put out a question to our readers we do twice a day emails, and then I put a column online. I said, well, we're thinking about adding a commentary section. What do you think about that? Would you like us to do that? Would that be useful? And I got to tell you, I was shocked by the response. 80%, 85% of the people that responded, and remember, they had to respond by sending me an email. It wasn't like click a button and fill out a form. They had to take a proactive stand to reach out to me. 80 to 85% of those people said, God, no, there's plenty of opinions out there that I can get all the opinions I want. And what I heard over and over again is the reason I subscribe to Salem Reporter is because you don't have opinions and you just give me the information.
Right.
And so, frankly, that's been a second source of endorsement for this idea I have in my head that let's just give it to them straight, be transparent, and they will come to us.
Quick question about that transparency. When you first got there and you're turning around the model of the Mount Here enterprise and you're taking I got to talk to you later about your prison guard. I want to know how he's doing. You wanted to communicate to them. You wanted to put out there to your readers or potential readers that you were different, you were transparent. I mean, one way to do that is do great journalism and hope that they all figure it out. What would be a more overt way to push that out and say, we're here, we're doing, this is how the sausage is made, this is this is our sacred trust. How did you communicate all of that to the public?
Well, frankly, my primary way is a column. I will write a column to readers, and I'm just sort of, I kind of imagined I'm just sitting down at the local diner with Joe and Billy and Sarah and just having a conversation. I try to keep my columns very conversational, very clear, and focused. And so that's my primary way. And we have that runs both in print, online. I push it out in our emails. But we also do things like, and this is no news to anyone in this organization, I'm sure, but one of the things we did is started hosting town halls. You know, there was a big issue with the homeless in one of our larger cities. And so we convened a town hall and we told people, said, well, we're not here to settle this issue. We're here to inform you about this issue. We put together this panel and we're going to stream it on Facebook. And that helped build our credibility, that we were partners with the community, that we weren't just going to throw rocks through the windows, but we were going to try and figure out how to replace the glass.
Right. We are getting close to our time to wrap up because we want to give everybody a 5-minute break because I want to talk everybody into going to the next session. You have to go out of this session and then check into the next session, which is another session with Les, where he's going to get more into the weeds with us and talk about how to do a lot of this stuff. But the last question I have for you right now is, how do you feel about the use of mugshots in the paper? Do you use them?
We use them very rarely.
Okay.
And there's legislation in Oregon right now that's pending that would allow police agencies to stop distributing mugshots. I've argued against that, but we typically don't use mugshots unless it's a significant crime. Number one. Number two, if it's someone they're looking for, somebody who's been involved in a string of crimes. But generally, I don't. Let me just throw out one last thing before we get out of this session, if I may. I'm really passionate about all of this, and I invite anyone that has follow-up questions or would even like me to chat with their newsrooms. Please reach out. That's why I'm not retired. Is I feel I've got a duty to our profession to recruit more of you to help push this idea of this credibility, and I'm willing to do what I can to help you if you need the help.
Great. Well, we're going to distribute your contact information far and wide, so you'll be getting calls and emails from people. Does anybody else have a question here before we let everyone take a break and go back and then get into the next session? I'm looking to see if there are any here. Nope, I think that's about it for right now. So we'll get some more in the next session, I'm sure. So thank you, Les, and we'll see everybody in about 8 minutes at 2 o'clock. We'll start another session with Les. Thank you.